Welcome to yet another episode of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. Today we are reading Bran 5, A Game of Thrones, also called Adventures in Wildling Cultural Exchange. This is where we get to see the first meeting between some wildlings, some free folk, and some Northmen, some Starks. And as we know, these two groups have a troubled history, a checkered past, you could say, but they come together in this chapter, and results are mixed. I would say mixed results. But let's get into that. So Bran and Robb are out to go for a ride on their horses, and this is very exciting for Bran because he's of course been cooped up in Winterfell for some weeks, cooped up inside his own mind matrix hallucination space, in fact, for some time, having Bloodraven tinker with his little noggin. That was happening for quite some time, but now Bran has been recuperated. If this was the real world, he probably would have gone through extensive physical therapy to regain the ability to move and live, I would think. But in this case, this is a fantasy book, so Bran wakes up from his weeks of being comatose and psychically mind-meddled, and now he's ready to go for a leisurely horse ride with his big brother Robb. Brother Bobby. And it's snowing lightly, because we need to be reminded of the coming winter. And Bran's a bit afraid to go outside Winterfell and to go ride, but he's determined to hide his fear and to ride out as proud as any knight. Because Bran's dream as a child was always to be a knight, and he seems to cling on to that dream, despite the not insignificant advantage of not having legs that he can use. If this was Star Wars, they would just build him some robot legs, like the spiky man, the spiky Darth Maul. But this isn't the real world, and this isn't Star Wars. This is Game of Thrones. That means when you get crippled, you become psychic. So psychic Bran goes out, and his horse is named Dancer, which is a pretty name for a horse. The horse has been specially trained to respond to Bran's special saddle situation. Being a cripple, he cannot control his horse with his legs. He needs to control it with touch and voice, and the horse is named Dancer. And the horse is said to be smarter than any horse had any right to be. It's been very good at learning to respond to Bran's touch. It's almost as though Bran, as a rider, is someone with psychic powers who can influence the minds of lesser creatures. It's almost as though Bran might be using his magic powers to better communicate his will onto this horse Dancer. What if? I mean, do you think Bran ever could have been a horse warg instead of a direwolf warg? I mean, what if Summer died, or Bran didn't get to keep Summer? Would he have teamed up with Dancer, the horse, and they would have gone off on equine adventures together, with Bran having this psychic, intimate bond with his horse? They would have been really good at polo, wouldn't they? That would be exciting. They could do. You ever see those tricks that like people do handstands on horseback, and that Bran could do that. That would be much more pleasant than all of this this Bloodraven stuff. Anyway, so they're going on, and Theon Greyjoy is also coming. Theon Greyjoy has a longbow and a smile. Theon is always smiling slyly, as though the world is a secret joke that only Theon knows. That seems to be the sort of social armor that Theon wears. He always has a smirk, a superior smirk, to conceal his insecurities about, like, oh, I'm not a real Stark. It sucks because I'm not part of a family. Oh, I get to be a part of the most powerful nobility in the region, and unlike my brothers, I'm still alive, and I have all these advantages, and I get to hang around hunting and whoring all my days, but oh, I'm not part of a family. Theon Greyjoy. He's a bit of a moper, is Theon. And there's a bunch of others coming as well. There are some Stark guardsmen and the Stark horse guy, and also Maester Luwin, who is riding a donkey. Not sure why Luwin's riding a donkey instead of a horse. It's not like they're climbing the mountains of the moon today, but that is what Luwin is doing. And they leave Winterfell and they pass through the village outside Winterfell, which is mostly empty now. It only really fills up when the winter comes, and it becomes the winter town, when all of the peasantry huddle up by Winterfell for protection and warmth and food during the long winter. And so Bran reflects on the coming of winter. Winter is coming. It's especially Bran's chapters that emphasize this whole winter is coming thing. Which is probably because Bran is supposedly involved in this kind of cosmic level, seasonal, magical, high and mighty, epic fantasy, good versus evil, White Walker shit that's going down. So that's why it's emphasized in his chapters. And the direwolves are also coming, Summer and Greywind, and the villagers in the winter town are eyeing the direwolves suspiciously, as you would. These giant, dangerous-looking wolf creatures. And they pass by a tavern called the Smoking Log, and Theon Greyjoy calls out to Kira, who is a tavern wench who works there, and he boasts to Robb about how Kira squirms like a weasel in bed. Kira actually has an arc in this story. She's one of those many minor, tertiary, quaternary characters who seems totally insignificant, but they're actually repeated mentions to her. You can actually stitch a sort of an arc together. So Kira, when Theon comes back to Winterfell and betrays the Starks and takes over, he takes Kira specifically as his bed warmer when he takes Winterfell. And then later Kira is captured by the Boltons when they sack Winterfell, and so Kira ends up at the Dreadfort, and then she escapes with Theon in that whole sort of thing orchestrated by Ramsay Snow, and then she gets hunted down by Ramsay and gets flayed, or some terrible shit happens to her. So Kira is yet another example of those average, innocent people who get dragged into the politics and the bullshit of the High Lords of Game of Thrones and come out none the better for it, or in Kira's case, don't come out of it at all. R.I.P. Kira. Rest in pieces because Ramsay flayed her. So they keep on riding, and but then Robb shushes Theon's talk of sex because, of course, Bran is welcome to come and watch the execution of Garrod, because executions are fine and dandy, but you couldn't possibly mention lovemaking in the presence of an 8-year-old, because that would be obscene. Execution's fine, though. And Bran thinks a little bit about his relationship with Theon. Robb and Theon seem fairly close, but Bran, well, it said that Robb admires Theon, whereas Bran had never warmed to Theon. So Bran's riding pretty well, and they go, hey, let's notch this up a bit. Let's turn the horse up to 11, and so they go riding a bit faster. Although Robb always sort of keeps half an eye on Bran to make sure he's clinging on okay on his little cripple saddle. He's a good brother, Robb. He's good. I mean, he's got a lot of responsibilities right now, but he's also finding the time to go for a little ride with Bran and looking after him and having a nice time. And Bran thinks that, riding fast like this is almost as good as flying. So those sort of memories of Bloodraven and Psychic Awakening are still sort of percolating through his little brain box. But he notices that something's troubling his brother, and so they slow down and they talk at some point. And Robb sort of alludes to some of his fears and concerns, and he mentions that the direwolves, sometimes I think that they know things, or that they sense things, which of course they can. We never really get to learn the depth of Robb's relationship to Greywind, because of course we never get a Robb POV, so we never really know how deep that relationship goes. All we know is that Greywind is killed shortly after Robb is, and a popular fan theory is that Greywind, after Robb died, he might have walked into Greywind at the Red Wedding, and he only would have been in there for a matter of minutes, but it might have meant that Robb had to suffer 2 deaths in a short period of time, which, George Martin keeps on finding even more unpleasant and cruel and tragic ways for his characters to die, and double-decker dead man Rob might be another example of that. R.I.P. Rob. And they're sort of writing, and they're chatting, and Rob says there was a letter. And Bran goes, shit, this can't be good, because dark wings, dark words, right? It's interesting that proverb about the messenger ravens is seen as this ominous thing, when Bran is taught by a blood raven and skin changes into ravens and stuff. So it's almost as though the dark, ominous sign of the raven could apply to Bran's own magical adventures that he goes on later. Anyway, so Bran reflects on some of the bad news that's come in lately, that Uncle Benjen is still missing, that Catelyn has taken Tyrion as a prisoner, and Bran goes, oh, by the way, Lannister, didn't something happen to me involving Lannisters? What? It's on the tip of my tongue. What? Something? Jaime? Cersei? Something about a tower? But he can't quite grasp the memory, because of course Bloodraven deleted the memory of Bran's fall from the tower pushed by Jaime in that previous chapter. Which again is fucking terrifying. Bloodraven has edited Bran's brain. So when Bran tries to remember it, he feels dizzy and his stomach clenches hard as a stone. It's like Bloodraven has coded some kind of like disincentive reaction. It's like he's been conditioned. Like, it's like the memory is still there, but it's been made unpleasant in such a way that Bran can't quite access it. But many readers wonder if he might access it later, and how he might respond when he finds out. That would be cool. And Bran's like, okay, what's this new news? How can it possibly be worse than everything else we've heard? Well, hold on, Bran, because Robb tells him that Jory Castle is dead, Will and Heward are dead, murdered by the Kingslayer, outside the brothel in King's Landing. And he also tells him that Ned has been had his leg a little bit squashed by a horsey horse, and Bran is upset. He's very upset by the death of Jory, because Jory was a kind figure to Bran, and he has all these good memories about Jory, and so Bran's like, shit, this is bad, what are you going to do? And then Robb's like, well, I'll try and, I'll be Robb the Lord. So we have this dichotomy again between Robb, the kind-hearted brother who reveals his insecurities to Bran, and Robb the Lord, who needs to be strong and mature and decisive. So Theon rides up and he's like, yo, you need to call the banners, you need to go on a war. It's going to be great. I love war. War's the best. Blood for blood, Theon Greyjoy says, and he has a hungry look for him. Blood for blood is an interesting phrase because, of course, the Starks drew blood from the Greyjoys in the Greyjoy Rebellion. The Starks were participants in the war that killed Theon's brothers. So by the same token that Theon argues the Starks should go to war against the Lannisters for what they did to Ned, Theon could argue, or think to himself, that the Greyjoys should war against the Starks for what the Starks did to the Greyjoys. And indeed, Theon does end up betraying the Starks. So I wonder if the seeds of that betrayal are planted in these early days. And Theon's like, yeah, whatever. And then Bran thinks about some of the other people who are close to him and other advisors, and he's like, I wish my mother Catelyn was here. I wish, where the hell's Maester Luwin? He's lagging behind on his donkey. I wish he was here right now. And Theon's like, the Maester, he's as bloody timid as an old woman. Which is like, tell that to the Queen of Thorns, right? But Robb's like, look, no, I listen to Maester Luwin. I listen to everyone. Because Robb's a good fucking leader. He's a great leader. He listens to a variety of viewpoints. Because that's the only way to get a fucking sense of what's what. And then Bran starts to think about, wow, so war might happen, shit. And then he reflects on how, well, once the talk of war would have excited him, but now it only scared him. So that's the sort of beginning of Bran's sort of de-naivety when he starts to realize that, wow, stories in War and Nights are actually fucking gross because there's blood gets on your trousers. It's awful. The dry cleaning costs alone are exorbitant. What is this? What is... So that's an issue. Bran starts to realize that all of his stories and his excitement about horror stories and knights and pageantry is not super great because conflict's terrible and all we really need is peace and security and porridge and slippers. That's all we should really ever aspire to, is good porridge and comfy slippers. That's the realization that Bran eventually comes to. Sansa is the same. So Bran's like, oh, but I won't admit to weakness and I'll stay tough and I'm a man. I'm an 8-year-old man. And then they wander around the trees and he takes in all the sights and smells of the trees. Of course, trees become very significant to Bran. He becomes half a bloody tree himself, a little shriveled up husk, little shrub psychic boy is what Bran becomes, and he's communing with the trees now, with the old gods. And then Bran, for a moment, almost starts to cry all of a sudden because he realizes, oh, this stream, Jory took us here to fish, and now Jory's dead. Why would anyone want to kill poor sweet Jory? And he also thinks about Jon. Will I ever see Jon again? He's up at the Castle Black. What's up with that? And of course, yeah, Bran doesn't see Jon, at least as far as Book 5. Maybe he will see his resurrected self. And then they cross the stream, and Bran feels good about riding. It makes him feel strong again. And then he looks up at the trees and he dreams of climbing them right to the very top so that the whole forest would be spread out beneath him. Which is a repetition of this theme of Bran seeing from afar and seeing everything from above, everything laid out before him, which is of course what he ends up doing psychically as a tree boy. And then they hear the wolves howling and Rob's like, oh, I'll go and fetch the wolves because we need to grab the wolves before we go back. So I'll fetch the wolves. Bran, you stay here. Now, of course, Rob is activating a classic horror movie strategy, which is when you hear wolves howling alone in the forest, split up with your group. Because right now it's just Rob and Bran alone in the woods together. And Rob decides that the correct stratagem, when you hear wolves howling and you hear threat, is to split up and leave your crippled 8-year-old younger brother alone in the woods. Rob has made some bad decisions in Game of Thrones. The biggest of which was probably marrying Jane Westerling. Probably the second worst, or not the second, but one of the other worst decisions was leaving Bran alone in the woods. Bad decision. A bad decision which quickly reaps bad rewards when soon strangers approach. And this skeevy, black-cloaked, dirty, smelly, Tim Burton-esque wildling man goes, ew, all alone in the woods, are you, little cripper boy? And Bran's like, no, not me. I'm all good, thanks. No, I don't want to buy your wares. I'm just sitting pretty, mate. And then he's like, ew, I'm going to take your shit. There are other people as well. There's a woman with a big long spear, and there's a big bald man, and they're all in raggedy ass patched up clothes. And Bran notices that 2 of these 6 people have black cloaks. They're deserters from the Night's Watch, and Bran remembers a warning that his father once gave, that deserters of the Night's Watch are some of the most dangerous people because they know that their lives are forfeit if they get caught. The price for desertion is death, as we learned in the first chapter of Game of Thrones Brand 1 when Garrett got executed. So these people are dead men walking, which means they fear nothing. They've got nothing to lose. It's almost as though a criminal justice system that doles out death as a punishment almost encourages violent behavior in those who have committed the same. Sometimes. I don't know. And so basically Bran gets surrounded by these skeevy-ass wildling and Night's Watch deserter blokes. This is a group of both Night's Watch deserters and wildlings working together, which is an interesting combination. We don't see a lot of that, but there you go. So they come up to Bran and they're like, "Are you some kind of fucking cripple? Why are you all strapped up to this horse like that? What's up with that?" And then Bran's like, "I'm not a cripple. I'm Brandon Stark of Winterfell, and I'll cut off your head if you talk to me wrong." Which is a bit like Arya at the gates of the Red Keep, this like 8-year-old going, "I'm so big and important," which is kind of ridiculous, and indeed the man with the grey stubbled face laughs, as well you would when when an 8-year-old cripple on his own says, "Brah." Anyway, and then one of the wildlings is like, Osha. This is Osha, by the way. We don't know it yet, but this is Osha. And Osha says, like, "Oh, let's capture... This is a Stark lordling. Let's capture this Stark kid, take it back to Mance Rayder. Mance Rayder would love a fucking Stark hostage, man." But then the bloke's like, "For real? Like we're not going back north again. The White Walkers won't care if we have a hostage." So we learn here that the reason why the wildlings are coming south is because they're fleeing the White Walkers. So this is the sort of early... This is one of these early reminders of the threat of the White Walkers, and the wildlings are aware of this and fleeing south. And the guy tries to cut Bran off the straps off the horse, and it cuts through Bran's leg. He doesn't feel it because his legs are numb. And then Robb turns up. Finally, Robb turns up. He corrects his error of leaving his 8-year-old younger brother alone in the woods, and he says, "Put down your steel, and I promise you'll have a quick and painless death." Which, again, is another terrible threat. If you're saying, "Here are your choices, you die or you fight me," people are probably going to go with option B much of the time, right? He should have said, "Put down your steel, and I'll let you live." And then he could have killed them later if he had to, and not to be too Machiavellian about it, but don't threaten death on people who see the option of fighting you. And they're like, "But look, mate, you really want to fight me, cunt? We have 6 blokes. You have a cripple and a teenager." And then the cripple says, and then Robb says, "Well, actually, I have wolves." It's like a Crocodile Dundee, "This is a knife" sort of a moment, because Robb activates his trap card and puts down 2 dire wolves. Summer and Greywind stalk up behind Robb, and Greywind has blood dripping from his muzzle because he just killed a stag or a deer of some kind. And the wildling's like, "Fuck, dire wolves? What is this? Is this fucking what, Pokemon? You're just gonna pull out animals to do battles for you? Is this the kind of game we're playing? What, you've got to Zagoons. What are the doggo Pokemon? You've got to... We haven't got any... You can't do a Pokemon battle when the other side hasn't got Pokemon." And then Robb says, "Oh, but you can." And then they fight. But first we get some direwolf anatomy. We're told that direwolves have bigger heads and longer legs than normal wolves, and the snout and jaw are markedly leaner and more pronounced than on a regular wolf. That fact will come in handy one day, no doubt, for your next Direwolf Anatomy 101 test. And so they fight, and spoiler, direwolves are OP. So they kill most of the wildlings and deserters. Osha survives. She's sort of in a stream with her spear, and one of the other wildling deserter blokes survives, and he holds Bran hostage with a knife under his throat. And we have some description of the carnage after all of these deaths. Bran sees everything, it says, because Bran does do a lot of seeing everything, and it's described the remains of Harley, one of the wildling women whose gizzards are glistening blue snakes all slopped out of her body. So Bran seeing human beings eaten alive, but it's a good thing he didn't hear about that sex before, because that could have been traumatic. And then the hostage taker, the bloke called Stiv, is as scared as Bran was. Bran realizes, which is nice. We have this moment of humanization. These guys aren't just smelly, dirty, baddie people. They are human beings who are acting partly out of fear, self-preservation, as almost anyone would. And the man mutters, "Starks, bloody fucking Starks, up in my shiznit again." Which you would, because as a wildling, I mean, you've heard about the Starks, who are these cruel, compassionless, warlike, powerful men who have kept your people out of the fertile lands with a giant wall of ice, who have continually fought against your people, and now you've come south to run away from evil ice demons, and now the fucking Starks are setting savage, legendary, mythical wolf beasts out to pull gizzards like blue snakes out of the belly of your bloody wildling mate. Your friends are getting eaten by wolves owned by Starks, and if that doesn't prove every Stark prejudice you've ever had in your life, what would? It's a difficult relationship between the Starks and the wildlings. And so the hostage taker Stiv is like, all right, this is my only way out of here. I'm going to kill Bran unless you do as I say. Get off your horse and kill the direwolves. And Rob's like, I kind of don't want to kill the direwolves, though. And then all of a sudden, just at this difficult juncture, an arrow punches through the chest of Stiv, and Theon Greyjoy had saved the day with a well-placed arrow, killing Stiv and resolving the hostage crisis. If only every hostage crisis could be resolved with a well-placed arrow. I mean, imagine if the Iranian hostage crisis was solved with a well-placed arrow. Argo would have been much shorter. And so then the guardsmen arrive. The guardsmen who were meant to be here to protect Bran, they finally catch up and ride in and take control of the situation, and everything is sorted out. Although the guardsmen have a pale look to their face when they observe the direwolves feeding on the corpses of the slain. So I mean, sometimes people complain about, like, oh, the Boltons are so, like, they're like evil cartoons. They like to flay people, and they're not very nice to people. Well, the Starks literally have man-eating wolves as pets. Pets that eat people? Like, that's on another level to Pokemon. This ain't your daddy's Zirac Zagoon. This Pokemon's eating cunts. That's hardcore. That's pretty easy to see as an evil characteristic. So from a certain point of view, the Starks aren't as evil as the Boltons. But from my point of view, the Starks are evil, said Anakin. See? It's all about perspective. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Anyway, so that all happens, and then Theon brags about how, ooh, look at how I saved the day. A dead enemy is a thing of beauty, he says. What the fuck do you know about beauty, Theon Greyjoy? And so then Robb goes off his rocker at Theon, saying, but what, if you missed that arrow, you could have killed Bran. Which is a not unreasonable concern, but he makes a pretty big deal out of it. He is sort of lashing out, I think. This is fear manifesting as criticism. But then the real fuck-up emerges when Robb asks the guardsman, where the fuck were you that whole time? Fucking scratching your asses. And then the guardsmen reveal that Theon spied a turkey. And Theon and the guardsmen had gone on a turkey hunt to catch a turkey that they wanted to eat. And that was why they weren't there, to protect their liege lord, their fucking Prince of Winterfell. That's the real fuck-up. And so Robb gets rightfully very angry at that. And then they discuss the deserters from the Night's Watch, and they discuss the dead, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, all right, hold on a minute, but Osha, this wildling woman with the spear, is still alive. What are we going to do with her? And Theon Greyjoy suggests that Robb give her to the wolves. Theon really is a bloodthirsty cunt in these books. Give her to the wolves. Do you really want to see an unarmed woman torn apart by dogs in front of you? Like, who are you, Ramsay Bolton? Theon's a bit of a prick. Even the guardsmen look queasy, as well they bloody should. And then Rob asks the woman what's her name, and she says Osher. So we have another moment of humanization. And Rob's kind of looking for excuses to not have to kill her, because Rob is being Rob the Lord here, and he realizes that he needs to act sternly and decisively. But eventually Lewin says, well, let's question her. That'd be a good idea. So Rob's like, yes, question her. We will learn the truths and the lies and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and we'll get essential information out of this inquiry, is what Rob says. But he's just latching on to an excuse to not kill an unarmed woman, which is something that you really shouldn't need an excuse for. But this is Westeros. Welcome to Westeros. This is a cruel world, and sometimes the little scraps of humanity and compassion you can find must be salvaged and snatched from the slightest little slivers. Thank you for listening to this episode of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Shift X. I hope you've been enjoying the series. I hope you will listen to future episodes, and I hope that you have a lovely day. Cheers.